You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today we're going to tackle influencer marketing. So we've been following this pretty closely over the past few years as it ramped up. A lot of it, I think, associated with TikTok and the rise that happened right around the beginning of the pandemic a few years back. There's been a lot of chatter about it lately, coming up in a ton of the conversation that I'm having. So we got some, great friends, partners, supporters of the network over at Pop Shorts, and Adam is here to kind of lend us his expertise in this space as a whole. And so it's going to be a great conversation, a ton of things we're going to tackle, how this space has evolved, newest trends, things we should be looking for, KPIs we should follow, all that fun stuff. But before we jump into that, Adam, I'll kick it over to you. If you want to do a brief intro on yourself and the company, that'd be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah. So I'm Adam Gospel. I'm the head of creative and co-founder over here at Pop Shorts. We founded a company in 2013. And, we provide influencer marketing and social media services to mostly large brands, but brands of all shapes and sizes and a number of different verticals.
Awesome. So I want to start off with kind of like where it's currently at, but how it's kind of evolved over the past few years as well, influencer marketing as a whole. Would love to hear your thoughts there, and then, talk a little bit about trends you see popping up that people should be thinking about.
Yeah, sure. I guess like in the most recent years, like over the past 3 to 5 years, TikTok kind of came on the scene from being something to watch when it was ByteDance and it was mainly a bunch of dancing videos but it was gaining popularity pretty quickly. And then it kind of, I guess, rebranded over as TikTok. And, we weren't really sure what was going to happen there. Initially, brands were kind of just looking at it as something to keep an eye on, but weren't really putting any ad dollars there. And then over the past few years, we've seen every brand now needs to be on TikTok. And all of the influencer marketing campaigns we're doing are looking for TikTok influencers. So we've seen like a massive shift, not necessarily away from Meta Reels, but just stealing ad dollars away from Meta and their products, I think. And then now we're looking at potential TikTok bans are constantly in the news. So people are kind of, I guess it creates some anxiety for marketers, wondering if they should be pouring ad dollars into a platform that could go away, and wondering what's next for everyone. Which I think is a good question to think about and talk about, but is very much uncertain.
But from the TikTok standpoint, so, people are going back and forth or have been, but you live, in this space all day, every day. Your kind of advice is you should be on TikTok.
Yeah. I guess like looking at Congress and wondering what they may or may not do. I think they're slow to act a lot of times. So I think trying to find your immediate strategy based on what Congress might or is going to do is a bit silly. So at the moment, the eyeballs are on TikTok. And if you're a marketer and you want to reach eyeballs, it's currently on TikTok. It is also across Meta products, YouTube, a host of different social media platforms. So I'm not saying TikTok's exclusively where you need to be, but for a lot of companies, their audience is on that platform.
So in the meantime, yeah, just go for it, because you don't know what's going to happen. I agree with you. Not only are they slow to act, but completely unpredictable at times. And so, no, interesting.
Yeah, I would say something else about it, which is like, if you remember kind of back in the day when Facebook convinced all the marketers to pay a bunch of money to acquire new followers, and you could actually put out, ads to acquire followers. And then as soon as they did, it's not like Facebook got banned, but they essentially turned it into pay to play to reach your own followers after that. So people invested millions of dollars to acquire millions of followers, and they kind of switched it on them real quick. With TikTok, what I have noticed is that when you do like, a campaign and anything's designated as branded, it seems like the algorithm's just specifically harsh towards that content at times. And it's hard to have branded content go viral. So I know there is an option on TikTok for community interaction as kind of an objective. And one of those is to acquire new followers for a brand. And while I think brands may want to look at that, maybe that works right now. Maybe you can acquire followers and then they actually stay engaged in the moment with your organically posted content on your page. But just to be cautious from what we've learned in the past, focusing on follower acquisition versus focusing more on the actual engagement on your posts now. Just a word of caution, I guess, because anything could change anytime.
Yeah, I mean, they control the algorithm, right? That's where people are scratching their heads on a daily basis of, how do I get it? The biggest thing is, how do I get something to go viral? And I don't think there's necessarily an answer for that. I think it's a numbers game from what I can figure out, is the more shots on goal you have, right? So the more content you put out, the more opportunities there are for something to catch on and go viral. But there's not necessarily a formula out there for going viral. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I mean, that's what everybody wants, right? Is something to go viral.
I guess there isn't really, I mean, trying to answer someone who's like, how do I make this go viral? That's really tough. But we don't really focus so much on necessarily having something go viral as much as, will it beat the benchmarks that are out there for content? Are we actually engaging people? Are we hooking them into the video so that they want to keep watching? Are they engaging in the ways that we want to see them engaging? Are the comments positive? Are the emojis they're using positive? Are we getting enough likes on it? Or basically there's TikTok has a metric called the 6-second video through rate. And we've noticed that if we can beat their benchmark, which is 13.45 to 20%, a video has a greater chance of basically performing a lot better. It doesn't mean it will necessarily sometimes, which is kind of weird, but it does have a much greater chance. And if it comes on the lower end of that, or actually doesn't, even fall into that benchmark range, that video is basically not going to do well at all. I don't think I've really seen that turn into a successful video. So those first few seconds, basically how many people will be fed your video and then continue watching it for at least 6 seconds, determines largely how well your video is going to do. So you can have the best content in the world, but if you have this boring intro, that content is doomed. So I think there's not really necessarily a formula to go, or at least we don't know the formula fully to go viral, but there is kind of a formula or a way that you can set up videos that we think can lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, you make a great point, which is, we're dealing with a lot of executive teams. I talk about this quite a bit, who may be fantastic leaders, have great ideas, but just on the digital side need a little bit of education. And in the TikTok world, anything, right? They want it to go viral. But kind of what you're laying out was, that's nice, right? It's great, but that's not the all day, everyday performance that we're looking for. And there's a ton of different metrics that you were rattling off that people should be thinking about. Can we just go through a couple of those? Because I think those are meaningful. What people want to say is, at the end of the day, as they're reporting out on their media spend, is yes, I didn't have a single, the first question they get asked is, well, how much did you have, how many of these went viral and how much revenue did it drive? Traffic conversions, whatever it might be. And, I think the conversation a lot of times we're like, hey, we only had one, but let me actually walk you through why everything else we did was even more beneficial. And I'd love to hear a couple of those, just those metrics. And I also want to chat about how does it blend in? We talked a lot about, TikTok is top of everybody's mind, but how do we weave that into the rest of paid social campaigns?
And in terms of I guess what are the other kind of KPIs they're looking at?
You were rattling off some of them. I'd love to tackle just a couple people. A lot of times, people are taking notes as we're doing these. And so
sure.
Here, yeah.
I guess it depends on what their goal is for the campaign. So is it an awareness campaign? Is it to drive conversions? Is it to drive app installs? This is all going to impact kind of how you set up on the paid side, at least, or even if you're going to amplify organic content. The very first question that any platform is going to ask you is, what is your objective? And do you want an engagement campaign? Do you want a conversion campaign? Do you want an awareness campaign? And whatever you choose across any platform, whether it's TikTok, Meta, Twitter, whatever it might be, that'll greatly impact how people actually engage with your content, because they figure out who to kind of show your content to that's more likely to engage in that manner. So for example, if you're doing a video views campaign on TikTok, we can see that CPV oftentimes come down, or I guess like this, they call it a CPM, but the cost per actual view is very low. It can be under like half a cent per view. Whereas if you're going to do like, a conversion campaign on Meta, the cost per video view can then rise to, I don't know, 4 or 5 cents at times. But perhaps that might actually convert really well for you. So I think the first thing to do is consider, what is the goal of your campaign and how are you going to set up that content so that it'll perform well when you amplify it? And if you're trying to just get video views and awareness, you're going to want something that just catches people's attention, looks and feels as organic as possible. If it looks or feels like an ad, it's not going to perform as well with that goal. But if it's a conversion campaign, you want to be more upfront with what it is that you want people to convert to. For example, if it's an app that you're promoting, it doesn't mean that this shouldn't still try and look organic to the platform, but the call to action needs to be front loaded in that video, which normally wouldn't perform as well for a video view awareness campaign where you're just looking to drive video views and engagement. But it might end up performing a lot better on the conversion campaign.
Awesome. Then how are you looking at like the blend in TikTok, right? Do you have like a standard split between that and YouTube Shorts and Reels?
Yeah. It depends kind of on the client, honestly. We were initially introducing TikTok a few years ago, and it would take up a portion of the ad spend. And then I think for a lot of campaigns, there seems to be like, since we're dealing a lot with influencers, they're kind of saying, well, wherever their audience is. But we found that influencers oftentimes now are gaining larger followings more quickly across TikToks. And actually it starts to skew our campaigns more over to TikTok than Instagram or Meta Reels at times. YouTube Shorts still isn't really something we're seeing advertisers choose to activate on right now. I think it's a bit confusing for them what the pricing is, being able to guarantee results, then put paid media behind it. It's a little bit, I don't think like they're as comfortable with that process than they are with Meta and TikTok. So we're mainly seeing right now for video content, those two platforms. We do see Twitter in some circumstances when, we feel like the client's audience is on that platform. We don't really do much on Reddit, but I still think like those I would still call that a social platform, and I think could be valuable for some advertisers. We've tested something on Twitch, which is a whole different kind of experience as well. But the majority of our campaigns are Meta Reels and TikTok, and it kind of just depends on the client and what the campaign setup is, how granular you need to get if you're targeting as well, because Meta has the most granular of targeting options. So if you're looking to target, veterans who graduated from West Point, right, and are 35 to 54, you can find them on Meta, and trying to do that across any of the other platforms is much harder.
Well, when you think about then, dealing with influencers to create the content, like how much content are they cranking out? And then how specific is it to each platform? I mean, that's a tough area. I think that there is the influencer piece, which is, advertising, they're doing it for you, but there's also, how much are you asking them to put out? And then the next question that pops up a lot is, how do you keep it on brand? Right? Because that's always tough, because they're mixing their brand, right? They have their own brand as an influencer, and you're a brand, and you get really close, but inherently there's always differences in the brand as a whole between the influencer's brand and your brand.
This kind of goes into like, I guess, general best practices about recruiting creators. and how to set up your campaign as well for success. So let's start with finding the right creators and what that process looks like. You can use any of a number of different platforms out there currently to try and find creators. We're partnered at the moment with Creator IQ. We just moved over from Tagger, but both are good platforms. They come with a cost. So, by recruiting an agency like ours, you kind of avoid the fees of having to pay for seats on the platform. But there's probably also free tools out there as well that do something similar, but most of them are behind at least some sort of paywall. But you can use these platforms and then identify creators who have the target audience pretty much exactly you're looking for. You can, do sliders for this many percentage must be male or female. They need to be located in this geographical location, all these kinds of things. So whether you find your creators that way or you find them via some list and you ask them for their demographics and they line up with your brand, that's kind of step one, but that's the most basic of steps. Then I think it requires doing some research on the creator themselves to make sure that their brand's safe and you're not going to get blowback from hiring that creator and engaging with them, which I think is an important step that all of the large brands count on us to do. But if someone is listening to this and perhaps they're doing their own influencer marketing, they may kind of go a little bit light on this step, and it's important that they do that fully. So both looking through their content, trying to see if there's anything that comes up. It's hard to look through all of their content, but then using Google and also just typing in like their name and scandal or nude or whatever it is, and all these kinds of different things you can type in there to see if something comes up. Because we've had to get rid of a bunch of creators that we initially thought might be good for a brand because brand safety issues do come up. And then in terms of actually the creative strategy and how do you kind of meld their personality with yours? So let's say you've got a great brand safe creator, they've got a target audience you're looking for, but they've got their own personality still. So I think that's where it's important on the creative side to look through their content and come to that conversation with ideas that you think will pair the brand and their personality and the messaging for whatever it is. Let's say it's a product launch. Will pair the messaging well with their natural style. And you come to them with ideas that would organically, you think, fit with their feet. Just doing that kind of shows the creator as well that you've thought about this. They might like some of your ideas, or at least they'll give them a starting point so that they can come back and kind of meet you and say, okay, well, I like what you're thinking here, but I would do it this way. And you're going to get to a point where I think you're both happy with the creative direction and how the video is organic and it feels natural and you think it could still perform well on their feed, mixed with like how the messaging is integrated. I think that's just essential. So a lot of times what happens is when people set up influencer marketing campaigns that don't go so well, they identify a bunch of creators, they send them kind of a creative strategy and tell them follow this or get on all these different talking points. And it's not much of a conversation. It's kind of like, here's what you need to do. Here's your prompt. And then the creator's kind of trying to guess what the brand wants while doing what they want. And usually they guess wrong. So it needs to be more collaborative throughout the process than just giving them a brief and expecting them to nail it and perfectly, give you the brand exactly what you're looking for. Oftentimes creators will either go too heavy on the branding when you do that. So it'll just come across as too sponsored and inorganic, or it'll go too organic and not include enough branding. And it just feels like you're forcing it into a video versus this video is made as an ad that just like feels like fun to watch. Because ultimately, if viewers don't want to watch that content, they will not watch that content and then it will flop. So you need to create, a branded piece of content that people actually want to watch.
Right. I mean, they're following that influencer for a reason, right? Because they align. What's really interesting, though, is who holds the power in those discussions, right? Because the influencer wants the revenue, obviously, and, without that, they don't have a revenue stream without it, right? And so on the flip side, though, the brand really wants the influencer. So when you go into those conversations, who is owning, what's the best way for a brand to enter that conversation to kind of own it in the brand and not be offensive, right? I mean, and maybe at times, like
I've seen both sides own it. It depends on how big the creator is and how much influence, they have over the decision making over at the brand too. But I guess like my job is kind of the middleman, is to help both sides get to that agreement, to like what's going to make the most sense. So, it's hard for a brand with everything they're doing to then also run a whole influencer marketing campaign, talk to the creators. It's a time consuming process. So especially when you have multiple creators and you've got a lot else going on, you've got other marketing initiatives going on. So when we're brought in to basically help with just the influencer marketing part, we get to spend a lot more time with the creators themselves, talking through the content, the strategy, what we think can make the video better, going over their content outlines. And then before we even show like a content outline to a brand, we're going to review it internally. Or before we share content with the brand, we're going to review it internally. Either make edits or provide our own notes that we think will make sense. I think as like an agency that kind of perpetually plays this middleman, we get the experience on both sides. We get to hear the concerns of the creators on every single campaign. We get to hear the concerns of the brand on every campaign. When brands do multiple campaigns, we get to learn like what they don't like. And I think like that's really our top skill, is finding a way to bring that all together and into compelling content that ultimately will surpass those KPIs I talked about. And the performance will speak for itself at the end. But I think like, it's not just, okay, trust us, we know what we're doing. It's really listening to both sides and trying to take their concerns into consideration and finding a solution which everyone's happy with. Because ultimately, I think at the end of the day, like good content is mostly recognized as good content at the end of the day by everyone involved. I think it leads to more positive outcomes.
So at what point do you say, hey, brand, you can do this on your own? And at what point do they need to bring somebody in?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, because listening to this, it's literally startup to Fortune 100 and everybody
Sure.
in between and every vertical. I mean, there's 9,000, brands in the network. It's kind of like, it's literally everybody. Like, but there's a lot of people like, maybe I can do it on my own. And then is there a threshold where, you probably need to plug in an agency here, right?
Yeah, I think it comes down to both budget and time, right? Those are your resources. And when they become too constrained, but you've got enough money to bring in an agent, your time's too constrained, but you have the money to bring in an agency, or you just want to maybe see how that process is, get some additional learnings, then you can bring in an agency. If you don't have the budget, it's not really, you're not going to bring in an agency. I would advise against it, because you're really trying to shoestring everything and you don't want to pay for our services. And also for us, it may not make sense to take you on as a client. We have our own minimum spend over here. And then if you went to a different agency who does cater to a smaller budget, I might question how much effort and value they're going to put into that process. So you're going to probably perform those tasks better than they would. So if you've got a smaller budget, I would do it yourself. Although I would try and speak with someone who's worked in this industry to at least hear what your strategy is and maybe critique it a little bit. Because I think that when people do it themselves, they are capable. Like, this is something that someone could potentially do on their own at times. And sometimes people do it well, and sometimes people do it horribly. And I think it's good to just kind of check in with someone, try and find a friend in the industry. If you don't have one, you can email me, even if you've got a small budget and you just want to ask me, this is my strategy. What do you think of it? I can at least give you some tips that might help preserve some ad dollars. One of those is, I would say, when you create content with creators, if you have a smaller budget, I wouldn't worry so much about the size of the creator, because like we talked about earlier, the algorithms are quite tough. It's hard to guarantee anything that's going to go viral. I've seen creators with millions of followers get, 10,000 or less organic views at times for pieces of content. And when amplified, actually did quite well. So I'd recommend working with smaller creators who have the kind of style and look and feel and can create the content you're looking for. Are also easier for you to work with directly. You don't have to go through managers. At times you can contact them directly. Usually they'll have emails on their pages. And and reach out to them and let them know it's a paid opportunity. I think that there's a lot of people that want to do campaigns where it's paid on commission. And I think that, creators get a lot of those inquiries and they don't, it's hard to really execute those campaigns successfully on all sides. So I'd recommend offering them some compensation. For the smallest of creators, I would say their rates might come in like $100 to $1,500, right? You're kind of compensating their time more than at times for their following. And reach out to a number of them because you're going to get wildly different quotes from people with similar followings. So, don't just reach out to one and try and negotiate. I'd reach out to several so you have options.
This is an interesting trend, though. I mean, originally it was just write him a big check and have him go do it. And then we got into this pendulum swing back, which was, hey, actually, I want to pay. I mean, obviously the big ones, right? Write a big check, but hey, I want to go more to, the performance option, right? I'll give you an affiliate link. And if you actually drive conversions, you'll be, you get the affiliate referral fees. And so the more work you do, the more money you make. And now,
I would recommend against that for these small brands. Though. I think it's actually a really interesting one because I think for small brands, everyone thinks like, okay, well, the affiliate model is the way to go, right? Because it seems like the most cost conscious strategy. I would advise doing something slightly different. I would try and work with small creators that will allow you to own the content so that you can repurpose it, edit it, use it in paid ads, and then put paid media behind the different creative that you have made for you that you can acquire fairly cheaply. And then, test on a small scale if you're paid dollars and see which converts, and then put additional paid dollars behind the ones that convert for you. I think that's a more effective use of a small budget than going out to a bunch of creators thinking they're going to become wild brand advocates for you and do all these affiliate links. I think that,
especially if they're not making money up front, right?
Yeah, it's very rare. And normally what you're going to do is you're going to be very limited. Maybe there's one creator out there who actually genuinely has tried your product and likes it, but even they're going to get tired of trying to push out advertising for you. And how many of their fans can they convert over time? And there's, it's kind of like a Goldilocks scenario where it's very rare. Doesn't mean it can't work at times, but I don't think it's like largely a scalable strategy either. So, if you have a positive relationship with a small creator or even like a mid-sized creator who is converting for you, by all means, explore that. But let's say you get success from it and you want to grow that strategy out. It's a hard strategy to grow as well. So I think finding people who have tried your product, maybe have talked about it organically and naturally, are good people to try and activate as creators, but still try and work with them in a more traditional model. See if maybe they'll let you own the content, so then you can repurpose it and put paid dollars behind it. And then, you can get that benefit from the content that you now own. But yeah.
Oh, it's just funny. How rapidly everything's changing in the space, right? To be a digital marketer, right? In the space that everybody's literally trying to figure it out real time right now. And what strategies work, which ones don't. It's just interesting. And it's just data points. And we don't have that many data points on that many different models. But I love you. I mean, what you're explaining makes perfect sense. It's just interesting over time how that pendulum has gone back and forth as people experiment and get data points.
I should mention though that like with larger creators, they're going to have management teams and lawyers who are going to advise them, and owning the content is unrealistic. You're going to have to negotiate usage rights. Being able to share the content organically to your page and having them post it to theirs is what we normally push for. It's kind of standard, but additional paid usage rights are going to come at a cost. And it's not necessarily going to be a small cost at times either. So when you start to work with larger creators, just know that, you have to know what usage rights you want, and only ask for the ones you need. because you're going to pay, you don't want to pay for the rest of this stuff that you're not actually going to use. But even if larger brands, it's interesting because we've done like campaigns with large creators and small creators. We recently did the Oscars. So we did a campaign for the Oscars, and we activated a number of different creators from kind of different like entertainment backgrounds, come at it from different angles, some from like, hosting your own food and beverage party, and, creating mocktails to have like a Oscars viewing party, to, creators that really get into each of the nominees, and are kind of cinemaphiles. And then we have fashion creators, for example. And so we worked with a whole range of creators, and we weren't sure which content was going to perform the best. And the best content wasn't from the largest creator. It was from the video that just was the most viral. So we found that the content matters the most, I think, over even following. Having a number of different pieces of content is useful because then when you go to promote it in an ad set, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, they're very good at optimizing spend behind the top performing content. So naturally, you'll find the best content wins out. And for the Oscars, the number one performing video was this woman had a video where she put on 3 different outfits, and it was what I would wear to the Oscars if I was these Disney princesses. And the engagement on that was just insane. So we couldn't, at the very beginning when we got all the content in, we might think, okay, this video might perform well. We think this might perform well. But at the end of the day, you don't really know until you put it live. So I would say run with multiple pieces of content with whatever budget you have, so that, because you never know what's going to end up performing the best.
Do you have like newest trends you see popping up in the space? Like, I know it's moving fast and all, but are there new trends that are popping up that you've got your eye on, or that people, maybe there's a new platform. I don't know.
Yeah, there's kind of like what's going on with Twitter, and that's also kind of, I think, inspiring other platforms as well, as people are trying to find like alternatives, and Twitter's trying to go more video focused. So I think kind of that whole space is just interesting, and ultimately like none of them really compete at the moment. I think with, Instagram and Facebook, TikTok and YouTube fully on the video side. But I think that could happen. So it's kind of worth keeping an eye on. I don't think it's necessarily worth being being too early to a platform, because a lot of them end up just, having a little bit of a hype cycle and then dying out, and you could waste a lot of your resources there. But once you see it really is starting to pick up genuine steam, I think there is a benefit of being an early adopter and understanding deeply the kind of trends and styles that work on that platform. You obviously, with platforms like TikTok, have new products coming out, new features that are always worth exploring. Same with, anything YouTube even has obviously YouTube Shorts. So, if you have content you've created for TikTok or Meta Reels, test it across the different platforms, see what works, see if it performs well. Sometimes you can actually just repurpose full vertical content across different platforms now, because they have similar, the way that viewers view content and expect content to look and feel is similar across those platforms.
Are there any, the other question I get a lot is different verticals. Are there any new verticals that are popping up? I'm like fashion, I'm sure, beauty, I'm sure. But are there any new verticals that are popping up? Maybe it's B2B, maybe it's nonprofit. A lot of times I'm just talking, to brands, and they kind of isolate themselves saying, hey, this won't work for me, or I've tried it and it didn't work. And in that case, a lot of times the question, well, how many times did you try it? Did you just get it wrong the first time and it would work? But are there new,
yeah.
Are you ever surprised by a vertical that it actually really works in?
Yeah, it's I guess the hardest ones are often B2B, where they feel like they've got a very specific audience, which can be challenging. But then you look at even LinkedIn as a social platform at times. I have a friend who puts out content quite frequently on LinkedIn, and he's B2B, and he's doing video content that is like, like basically shortened interview content on LinkedIn. And there's not really a lot of competition in the feed. There's not as much competition in the feed for like video content, because not a lot of people are pushing it out on LinkedIn frequently.
Right.
So he's able to reach his target audience effectively. Whereas if he went to, Instagram, I think it would be very challenging. TikTok, quite challenging. Twitter, you do have more like micro communities on Twitter. I think, I like enjoy at times viewing FinTwit, my friends on, which is financial Twitter, find it interesting. My friend is deeply involved in real estate Twitter, Retwit. So trying to find those micro communities, I guess, if you have a very niche audience, but yeah, B2B is the toughest, I guess, on like the major social platforms where it feels like it's very broad. But then also like with some brands that we work with, let's say like state lotteries, we're not going after just like gamblers with that content. We're trying to create content that shows how normal people could like use scratchers to make their Friendsgiving more fun, right? So we create content around events and normal things that people do. Someone might be doing a get ready with me video. So you wouldn't think of like scratchers and fashion, but you can find a way to kind of combine verticals at times for products that you might not think belong there, but actually it works really well for that content and the creator's feed and what people like to watch on social platforms. So you can sometimes combine them too.
Yeah. What is the number one mistake that you see people make? And then what's the number one must do?
Number one mistake. I guess like the most obvious mistake to me is when brands try and get too much in one video. So for example, having a creator do a contest that requires them to do, follow us, find this post on our page, comment on it, like it, sign up to our email, whatever it is. And you'd be surprised, but like, just, you have to think like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the user. And to do that, you have to do two things. Like one is you should use the product. You should use the platform. So even if you don't like TikTok, you don't use it. You're like, oh, I'm only on Twitter. That's all I like to do. If you're going to be marketing to TikTok users, then you need to be using the platform to understand it. And understand like, use it enough so that you understand when you put yourself in the shoes of that user, like when I see content come up, am I going to do that? Or you have to be realistic with yourself. Are you going to follow those steps or not?
Yeah, I'm not leaving the platform to give my email address. Right.
And a lot of people won't leave the platform at all. So if you have like a landing page that you want them to hit, that already is quite a large barrier to entry that people don't think about. Like you've already, just even driving that click, like even if you do a highly efficient CPC with like traffic campaign on Facebook, you might get the cost per click down to 20 cents, right? Something like that. I don't know. Like maybe someone does better from time to time, but most campaigns that you do, and it depends what you're doing. Like we found like video on Facebook can actually drive quite an efficient CPC. But if you do like an Instagram story campaign, I think you're going to have a hard time driving the cost per click that low. So, you've already paid that much just to get people to click. And oftentimes it's more like $1, by the way. So, let's use like maybe a more realistic cost per click at times. So you've already whittled down that audience so much. And then are they going to, is it essential that they take that action? Like, do you need to drive them off site for that? What are you ultimately looking for them to do? Like, are you just looking for some positive engagement? If you want new followers, then from your campaign, then, and you want to do like a contest with a creator, then tell people, okay, just make sure you follow the brand and like this post, or like the brand and comment on this post. Make it very simple, all on platform, to get, that's the biggest mistake, is just expecting people to take actions that you wouldn't yourself take.
Is there like a number one thing that people do right? That you're like, this is a must do?
Okay. Um,
Maybe there's 15 of them and we can't capture it in the next 10 minutes.
the number one thing people do right.
Maybe you do it in every single campaign. I don't know. Maybe it's not limiting.
I know. I'm like thinking, I'm like, what's the one thing that I would say like really leads to a successful campaign here? It's so hard to like come up with one, but I would say like more, it's probably like success, I think, is driven from the process. So I would say requiring creators to provide content outlines for review before they begin creating.
Oh,
It aligns everyone, and you can find a lot of the problems immediately, or you can tweak it to your liking. Because once they've created that content and then having them reshoot, as a creator, again, putting yourself in their shoes, it doesn't feel great to say like, oh, like, we didn't really like this and we need you to reshoot the whole thing. And, sometimes a lot of time and effort goes into that. So when you can look at a content outline, review it, and oftentimes creators won't provide that detailed of a content outline. They might just provide a little blurb, but that's where you can go back and say, hey, we'd like to like understand a little bit more what it's going to look like really when you create this. We understand that you might improvise a bit, but can you detail out, like, where is this being filmed? Like, what's going to happen in the first 5 seconds versus whatever. And we try and get that detailed out so that we and the client can look at that and really understand what's going to be created. And if the content outline looks good for whatever it is you're trying to promote, and you're like, yeah, that just, I can visualize what that might look like with this creator. And I think that's going to be great. Then the content normally ends up looking great. So not everyone does that.
You eliminate the back and forth, the defending of the influencer. I mean, it's time, right? Time, effort, money. And sounds like,
yeah, but it takes time to do those content outlines though, too. So a lot of times brands are like, oh, we've got this campaign coming up and, like, well, we don't have that much time. So, we'll just give you the brief and go ahead and create what, just as long as it aligns with the brief, just go create your content. And I think that's just a mistake because it just leaves so much room for error. And, as a brand, you live and breathe your brand every day. You go and talk about it with your friends or your coworkers, and you understand what's, everything that brand has been about for however long you've been there, maybe even before then. And the creator, you can't assume they know all that and have all the nuanced and like kind of understanding of what you're looking for at this point in time. So the content outlines help align everyone. And it's just, I think it's the number one thing that sets up a campaign for success.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I've been picking your brain for, the past, 40 minutes or so. Yeah. Any questions you have for me? I always like to give that opportunity for guests as well. Yeah.
I guess like regarding social media or influencers, like what kind of questions are you getting? Like what is like the biggest problem that you're seeing people have that are trying to solve?
The biggest problem people are trying to solve is to get the metrics that make executive teams understand what they're doing is a success, which is where I was really intrigued at the beginning of the conversation around that piece, because it's so new. There's not enough data points, and executive teams want something very simple, right? Like on Amazon, it's return on ad spend. Well, I mean, I can give you whatever ROAS you want, right? Based on what words and titles and topics the words I'm bidding on, right? But it doesn't mean it drives incremental sales. But it's the easiest metric to explain. The perfect example, right, is I can bid on my own brand name, and then people are going to click on the ad and they're going to go buy. So my return on ad spend is going to look fantastic, but people are already searching on my name. So I'm just cannibalizing that sale anyways. But it looks really good on paper when you look at just the paid media side. But, I didn't get an increase in sales, which is what maybe the executive, obviously everybody wants. And so in this space, it is, how do I tie back incremental sales on all these different platforms? And how do I manage the I don't want to say missing the lack of information around the platforms as a whole, right? They say, well, why aren't you using YouTube Shorts? Well, to your point, like they ain't really performing right now. Okay, well, what about Reels? I bet I'm on Facebook all the time. I love Facebook Reels. Well, yeah, well, you're 55 and you're not the demographic we're going after. They're on TikTok. Well, I think TikTok's going to be banned. So that's why I love this conversation.
Or like the algorithm's tough on our content when we promote it. Like, I think it's challenging.
No. Yeah.
I also think I think there's like a lot of progress being made with like tracking, and then Apple comes in and they're like, all right, we're going to shut down all that progress.
The funniest thing though is all the marketers, even I talked to, everybody hit Ask App not to track.
Yeah.
Even like digital marketers who need that, right? Who want you to hit track, allow to tracking. Everybody hit Ask App not to track.
I know. So like, it's such like it's so weird. We're getting so close to like having such great data to be able to answer these questions. Now it was kind of like, it felt like we just like collectively like went into the Stone Age again a bit.
We're doing a lot.
Like, what are you doing then regarding that? Like we've done like brand lift studies to kind of show, the perception increase in, I guess like the likeliness to tune in for something, for like a TV show, like a live TV show, like the Oscars. But at times it is hard for attribution. So I guess what have you seen what are you seeing people do there?
Everybody's looking for a multi-touch attribution tool that they believe and works. And there's not one. There's multi-touch attribution tools out there, but people aren't confident in what it's saying because everybody rationalizes it's so difficult to do. As people are on, you get a device ID and get IP address, but people are bopping around all the time. There's so many electronic devices, and maybe they're, at home with their parents for the weekend. And they end up ordering something there. It's so convoluted. If anybody figures it out, it's instantaneously $1 billion company, right? You can start buying islands. That's where, if you can figure it out, that's how much money would pour into a company like that. It's just the age-old, very specific experimentation around, I'm going to run ads and drive to a specific goal. Maybe it is your direct-to-consumer site. Maybe it's a specific landing page. Maybe it's maybe it's an Amazon page, and measuring lift and increased sales. But that's done over time, right? And that's just what people are trying to do. That's
a good point, even right there. Like it's, you kind of do these things and it's like learnings over time. I would say like the other mistake I've seen people make is just think that they can hire these creators and they're going to see an instantaneous lift in sales. And, I don't think I think it's extraordinarily, we've tested it. Like it's even back in the day when Vine was around, and it was cheaper to hire creators too.
Vine. Yeah. That's right.
It's hard. Like I would say like putting out organic content and expecting a giant lift in sales is unrealistic. You have to have a paid strategy behind your content you're creating. I think the number one thing you're doing with creators is you're creating content that is designed by people who understand how to create compelling content on that platform.
Yeah.
But you need to put paid behind it to drive results. You need to do a lot of testing. Like you're not just going to instantaneously solve it.
Yeah, I think I love your point around owning the content at the end of the day. Right? Obviously, the big one's going to cost more money and you might not be able to get it, but owning it so that you can then use it and promote it and put money behind it as you see fit at the time you see fit, as opposed to just having somebody out there like the affiliate side I was explaining, like you're just hoping that it works, but you don't only need the content at the end of the day, and maybe it converts, maybe it doesn't. That's super interesting.
For large brands who don't own it though, they normally have like a product launch that they're doing where it's only going to be useful for a certain period of time. They're not really going to use it past a certain date. So it makes sense. But for smaller brands that maybe don't have as many products coming out, and that's where you'd want to own that content.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We were talking new product launch, leveraging influencer platforms. It's just a massive win. A massive win. I mean, because you think about the platforms, if you want to if somebody's going to your direct consumer site, that's one thing. If you're a larger brand where everybody's going for traffic there, the flip side is if you're a smaller brand and a lot of your traffic is on Amazon, I mean, you can get a lot of, off Amazon traffic, right? Outside Amazon properties, which Amazon highly values, drive that to a landing page of a new item, detail page views, conversion rate, everything is increased, and you shorten that window of time that it takes for you to trick the Amazon algorithm to start buying more product from you or boosting you to the top of organic.
I need to talk to some Amazon agencies. I found that space very interesting. We've kind of followed along. We haven't done anything in it. But it's like, it's fascinating in a way.
Oh, it's incredible, because then that at the end of the day increase brand awareness enough that people actually go to your direct consumer page to buy it. Maybe they want loyalty, points, or I don't know, see all the rest of your product offerings, whatever it might be. But that's another topic. But
yeah, and like other performance media, which is a whole nother topic.
Performance marketing.
Yeah,
I tell you, the one right now it's popping up is streaming TV ads getting highly targeted, where you can go in and you can say, I want to target, very specifically, right? So not the spray and pray, but hey, people streaming BritBox on a Roku stick, right? That bought diapers last month.
Mm-hmm.
You can get that specific now. And there's so much inventory because it's not being used. It's incredibly inexpensive. You can deliver an ad there. That's an area that's really blowing up right now. I've got to have a podcast on that one. So
send me a link, because I like to see, like, obviously, like the targeting is really important, but then it's like also what kind of ad are you going to show there?
Right. Exactly what I was thinking. Is there a traditional ad for a brand, right? Or not? Like,
are people also going to click out to your ad, or do they want to watch their content as an awareness play? I don't know.
The cool thing, if you're streaming, right, you usually capture the IP address, right? Mm-hmm. You capture the device ID. And then if somebody buys on it, you can do a direct attribution back to it. You can tie it all together.
Nice.
Super cool. So, but that's probably, I don't know.
And then you can take your customer list and chuck them into a meta campaign and match them all together. And then you can target them with influencer content. It's full circle. And
so what's really interesting here is this is where smaller brands are going to win. I have this conversation all the time. We have these large brands right now. A lot of them consolidating e-com teams, middle management, the ones that are doing all the execution. And there's all these new platforms, all these new ways, all these new strategies that need to be vetted out and practiced and executed. And like those people are going away, but you're going to have these mid-tier, small and mid-tier brands that are going to see it. They're going to see the value of what you're doing. They're going to see the value of these different things that are popping up, and they're going to grab hold and they're just going to blow up. But
the ones who do it well.
Yeah. So, hey, Adam, thanks so much for your time today. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for letting me pick your brain. Adam from Pop Shorts has just been a great friend, partner, supporter of the network. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks everybody for tuning in. All right. Thanks
so much for having me.
Absolutely,
Cheers.
my friend.